Who do you think they are to each other? Maybe they're tourists and the white guy is their tour guide.
Drinking at 4 a.m.
Yeah, you're right. That makes no sense. I have no idea.
Past Lives is without a doubt my favorite movie of 2023 so far. It's a movie loosely based off writer and director Celine Song's real life. She found herself where Nora was in the bar scene. In her own words, sitting there between these two men who I know love me in different ways, and there's something almost sci-fi about it. You feel like someone who can transcend culture and time and space and language. And Celine Song is right. Love can often feel so godlike. It is genuinely a higher power. It is something that takes priority above rationality. What else can provide such high highs and low lows other than love? People die because of love, for their children, for their partners, for their country. What else can make us feel like this? There is something to be said about how a woman's perception of love differs from a man's. For centuries, men have had the privilege to comfortably assert themselves above a woman, in politics, in marriage, in society, in sex. A theory by Susan Fiske and Peter Glick presents misogyny in the modern day very concisely. They propose the idea that sexism towards women is ambivalent. Essentially, they split misogyny into two camps: hostile and benevolent. With hostile misogyny, women are seen as having negative attributes like annoyingness or ungratefulness. For example, a man's hostily misogynistic thoughts come out when he says a woman is complaining about being paid less. In his mind, a woman needs to pipe down, stay in her place. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there is benevolent misogyny. This is the idea of women inherently being quiet, reserved, and innocent. Something, not someone, to be protected and kept pure. Something that a man is responsible for. While at a glance this could seem to place more value on women, when thinking about it just a second more, this puts so much pressure on women in heterosexual relationships to be objects that complete a man's emotional puzzle. Their purpose is to fulfill a man. Additionally, gender norms like this are reinforced by systems like religion. Just think about how in the most popular religions out there, God is a man. In the Bible, Eve is the origin of all sin. She tempts Adam to sin with her. This very, very basic Christian idea is fundamentally misogynistic and dangerous to those who choose to follow the Bible strictly. And if that wasn't enough, historically, women were not allowed to participate in the clergy. In the 1960s, less than 3% of the clergy were women, and these days that number is only about 20%. In a really fascinating study by Sean Byrne and Julia Busso, the participants were asked to rank their beliefs on a scale from 1 through 7, with 1 being agree least and 7 being agree most. On average, men and women agreed with the parts of religious texts relating to sexism and protective paternalism at least a 3 out of 7, with men statistically scoring about 0.8 points higher. So it's clear to see the effect that even the most sacred things have on our perception of gender norms, and in turn, love. So what does this all have to do with Past Lives? Well, really it has to do with the movie's female perspective. In Past Lives, following Nora, and by extension Celine Song, allows us to see the world largely through the perspective of a career-focused, driven woman. This is a non-stereotypical woman by Hollywood standards. For once, we're not following a man chasing this beautiful, made-up, playing hard-to-get woman, but following a woman who is just being a woman. But the effect that this perspective has on us is so not obvious. It feels different because for once, we're not looking at a classic trope play out like Hollywood has trained us to want to. We are seeing someone living, someone making decisions that make sense for their life. This is the least dramatized drama I have ever seen, just because it feels so real. It feels like this in huge part due to the actors. Look at the scene here. In most other movies, these two characters would have immediately hugged or spouted out some "I missed you" bullshit. But this is awkward, and awkward in the most realistic way. I mean, how could it not be? These two have only had glamorized, hazy, nostalgic images of each other for their whole lives, and now they're here, looking at each other. What else could you do? Additionally, the actor of Haesung does not immediately go into horny suitor mode because he genuinely missed Nora. He doesn't make an advance, he keeps his arm close by his sides because he is nervous, like he has always been. This is actually a detail I picked up on because of an interview with the actor of Haesung, Teo-yu.
I let myself be inspired by the child actor Seungmin, who, when I met him, was always so shy, and he had his elbows always to his upper body, almost taped. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's some beautiful piece of body language that I wanna carry with the adult.
Details like this are why the movie feels so real. And all of this is inherently feminist. Nora could have easily left her husband Arthur in the hands of any other director or writer, because male writers largely don't know how to write women. And since classic literature is so focused on male heroes and women who have decisions made for them, throwing away that life that Nora had for this dramatized idea of love would very well happen without Celine's song at the forefront of this project. But I'd go as far to say Nora is more of a person than almost any other character I've ever seen in a film. A classic screenwriting and literature saying is that characters are not people. This quote specifically stems from How to Read Literature Like a Professor. This book describes characters as writers' impressions that the reader is supposed to fill in the blanks for, build out the character's life in their head. But the authenticity, reality, and just pure basicness in which Nora and her life is presented makes her so much more fleshed out than any amount of dialogue could, and provides a digestible and straightforward method to tell this story. So when we're seeing this story through the lens of Celine's song and Nora, sexism in either form, hostile or benevolent, is not present, not there to distract us from the purpose of the movie, which is above that. The purpose, which is the struggle of thinking you've been too passive, or lost another, better life. The struggle of a lost identity, and the struggle to reclaim a past life. So, a woman's perspective on love. At large, it is untainted by desire for any sort of status boost, or material acquisition, or objectification. Women love not because of the standards, or expectation, but because of reality. So, we see Nora in this new age, loving who her life's choices guide her to. She marries another writer, someone she can laugh with, someone she can look at and be proud to call her husband. Nora's perception of love is pure and rational. But if we imagine the story from the perspective of Haesung, Nora's childhood love, patriarchal love tropes come crashing down on us. First of all, Haesung keeps this idea of Nora alive in his head for so long, even throughout dating other women. His true love is the idea of this girl he met decades ago. We see him obviously not fulfilled romantically, but also in his general life. He says he is average, and it's easy to see that Nora not filling his emotional puzzle piece is the root of his issue. This is not to say Haesung is a bad person, or an intentionally misogynistic person. It is a reflection of how the standards of love in centuries past, even though they may seem obsolete, still are some of the most powerful undercurrents our society must deal with.
And if a double-decker bus crashes into us.
500 Days of Summer is one of my favorite movies about love, but not because it is a dramatized, male-centric masterpiece in my mind. It's because of how interesting the meta-commentary through analysis of this film is, especially relating to a man's perception of love and how it plays with our expectations. On a first watch, a viewer will probably side with our protagonist, Tom, as he is tragically portrayed as being led on by Summer. But after further inspection, we learn that Summer was never looking for something serious and only commits to more and more and more because of how persistent Tom is. Tom is a hopeless romantic, and we see this through a literal musical number after Tom has sex with Summer for the first time. This guy has watched his fair share of movies, and his idea of love comes from that. His idea of love comes from loving this idea of a woman that is not even interested in him being his soulmate. Many men that accuse Summer of leading Tom on don't realize how hard it is to break something off with someone, especially with a persistent man, when you just know it will undoubtedly hurt them. Tom, and by extension many viewers, have this expectation of Summer to fall for him, and when she doesn't, Tom throws a hissy fit baby tantrum as if she owed him her time or her love. For me, it's hard to tell if 500 Days of Summer is a self-aware criticism of a man's love or a depiction of an incel, but whichever way you slice it, it provides a very good lens into the eyes of the average man who doesn't think about the effect that he has on the woman he pursues. Thinking about this film should be a sign that women do not exist for a man's pleasure. and to not take classic tropes and project them as your expectation for real life. We see this happen with Tom, and although this is fiction, this movie also feels utterly real, though for completely separate reasons than past lives. This movie exemplifies the guy that you know that pines over a woman that doesn't even think about him. The guy you know that thinks he's entitled to romantic love. Or the guy that you know who hates his ex not because she did something wrong, but because she is his ex. I bring up 500 Days of Summer because it's hard not to be a bit of a Tom when you first watch Past Lives. We, with no exaggeration, have been a bit brainwashed and overstimulated by Hollywood love to the point where we expect these movies to play out a certain way, to a point where we root for relationships that don't even make sense. I think most of us would be completely lying if we said that at one point we didn't want Nora and Haesung to get back together, even if your perception of that was flipped towards the end of the movie. What I'm trying to say is that living in a world of what-if scenarios is just not good for you. Look at Tom, look at Haesung, look at us as viewers of these two men. Our expectations, which are their expectations as well, lead us to, even for a second, want relationships that do not fit them as characters or as people. And to end the video, I just want to tell you a bit of a personal story. On September 7th, 2023, me and my girlfriend broke up. With college looming, it was a mutual decision that we'd made since the very start. We were going off to different states, and this seemed to align with statistically backed expectations. 98% of high school relationships don't make it past college. So we did it. We broke up, and on September 7th, 2023, I was a single man. It was the culmination of us being this one entity for so long, and it felt really weird, obviously. The invisible string that held all couples together was suddenly cut. Until 6 hours later when her flight landed, and with a quick text and a tear-filled FaceTime, I was not a single man. My girlfriend and I duct-taped that invisible string right back together, right where it ended. But there are still thoughts that haunt me about all that. Could we have stayed apart? Or was our love genuinely too strong to have that happen? Could we have just been friends? Or would there just be too much tension between us? Will this be a waste of time? Is there any other way this could have gone? You know, before September 7th, me and my girlfriend were stuck in a web of what-ifs and expectations. When we're faced with objects and people and places and experiences that frighten us, our brains have a brilliant ability to make lifetimes of stories out of that fear. Lifetimes of stories that will scare you just even more. If me and my girlfriend had gone along with that expectation, our relationship would have been done, our hearts broken, and our minds shattered right before college. But instead, we did what made sense for two people in love. We stayed together, and maybe we're in the 98%. But I like to think that we're the anomaly. The whole point of this video is to stop listening to expectation and do things that make sense for you. Nora did what made sense for her, and so did Summer, and I recommend you do the same. Live in reality, because your life awaits you there. Thanks for watching.